Good afternoon, everyone. We have another question. This is from Alan, and he has Bob the dog, which you can see in the corner of the screen there. And Bob the dog has a lump, and his owner, Alan, would like to know if he should be worried about it. Now, Bob the dog is an ocean dog. He lives on a boat, and I love him for that because I had a dog when I was a little girl who I lived on a boat with my parents. So I know all about boat dogs, and they always have a lovely part of my heart because of those memories I have with my dog Sasha when we lived on our boat. Bob the dog is a hero in his own right and a survivor of a crazy injury that he sustained. I think it was about a year or two ago. He was, presumably this is how it happened. I don't actually know the full story of how the event happened, but essentially he was stabbed in the chest by a stingray, the barb of a stingray. And I imagine he pounced on it on the shore or in the shallows and sustained that injury. But Alan and his dog were out at sea, or on a little island far from a vet clinic. And Alan had to bathe and care for Bob the dog and his wounds until he was able to get to a vet and get on antibiotics and pain relief. So a true hero survivor we have here. Now, Bob the dog has a lump on his neck. So that's why Alan wrote in, and he just wanted to know whether he should be worried about his fur babe. So it is a 7-year-old poodle cross shih tzu, which Alan called a shit poo. Now, I think you'll find, Alan, that they prefer to be called Shoodles or Pooshies, and that's very different to a shit poo. So on the behalf of Bob, I will stand to correct you there. All right, jokes aside, finding a lump or a bump on your dog's skin is scary stuff. And of course, the first thing you're going to think about is cancer. And, how much risk is this to my dog's life? Well, the good news is that about 60 to 70%, or some studies even say 80%, of lumps that show up on dog's skin are benign. So what that means is they're not harmful, they don't spread, they're not nasty causes of disease. They're just a little area of excess cell growth that is not going to make your dog sick. Now, unfortunately, I can't answer this question with certainty, even though chances are it is benign. We can't diagnose a mass on the skin by looking at it, and we certainly can't say whether it's cancerous or benign with the naked eye. So what you have to do with lumps on skin is go to your vets and have them examine it and likely do tests on it to determine what's going on. So your vet will probably recommend a fine needle aspirate in the consult. So that's just where they pop a little needle into that lump, and it would sting a little bit like a mosquito bite or a vaccination. We're going to take away some cells when we put the needle in. We're going to draw back and we take cells out of the lump. And then we put those cells onto a slide and look at them under the microscope. If we're suspicious that the lump is a nasty one, then we would send it to the external laboratory, to the veterinary pathologists, to have a look at the cells. And then they can help us make a definitive diagnosis, so a certain diagnosis about what this lump is. And then we can find out whether it's a nasty one, whether it should be removed surgically, whether we can monitor it for a time, whether it's likely to resolve on its own. So all of these are possible outcomes. So in this photo that Alan put on our Facebook group, it looks like a benign little lump, something that's harmless. But again, it's impossible to diagnose that by just looking at it. So if Bob the dog came to me in the clinic, I would be popping a needle into that, doing a biopsy and making sure I got some cells back, and finding out for certain what it is before giving any advice. It is easy for vets to become a bit complacent about lumps and bumps because we see them so often every day, and majority of them, as we said in the beginning, are benign and they're not a problem. But because we can't ever be 100% certain just by looking at it, it's the safest thing to do is to always test, and visual monitoring of a lump is just not enough. So basically cancer is a cellular diagnosis. So you have to examine the cells under a microscope to be able to identify what kind of cancer it is and how it's behaving, whether it's considered benign or malignant. So that's why it's always recommended to do that. We can say, keep an eye on it, make sure, see how it's growing or changing in appearance, see if it starts to irritate the patient or Bob, but those guidelines, they're really not enough for us to be sure. So I guess what I'm saying is for us to be proactive and to make sure that we are detecting cancers early, we do have to test them. And the reason that's important, as in the few cases that we find are cancerous, then the prognosis, which is how likely they are to recover, is better, because when we can detect cancer early, on the skin, in this case, we can remove it with what we call clear margins. So if you've got cancerous cells, then around that you will have normal cells. So you want to cut into the normal cells and close it so all of your cancerous cells are removed. So with early detection, you can do that more effectively with clear margins and get rid of the nasty cells. And in the case where you don't, that's when we often go on to radiation and chemo to mop up the rest of those cancer cells. But I think that's above and beyond probably what we're looking at in this case. As I said originally, we've got 60 to 80% of lumps on dog skins are benign. So it's definitely nothing to panic about. But I would not be able to live with myself if I ever, misled anyone to believe something was not serious when it was. And so that's why I just go straight to testing every time. All right, I hope that was helpful. If you do want to learn more about cancer and you've got my book, it's in chapter 9 is about cancer. Page 157 is titled Dogs Get Cancer Too. So then you can learn about that then. All right, guys, have a lovely weekend and we'll catch up next week. Bye.